Okay, good evening. We're up to the new parak, Daf Ayin Beis on the days. If you just take a look at Rashi, you have Rashi on top, and then you have Rashi on the bottom. You notice that, guys? Hajalacha Rabbi Yishmael. Then on the left side of the Gemara, you have Rashi. Underneath the Gemara, you have Rashi Kisveyad. So if you look at the fine print underneath Rashi Kisveyad, very fine print. Take a very close look, Nasan. I'll, I'll do it as well. Me perik, you don't see it? Come here. You leave it to me.
Right under this.
Over here.
Yeah. So it says, Mi perik ve'elu menachos ad perik shtei alechem. From this perik to the perik shtei alechem, netak kisei yad shel Rabbeinu B'tzal Ashkenazi. That's the one who put that to Shid Mikubetzes. So that's Sal al Gilyon Hashash Shalo Shenimsa B'Yushalayim B'Zel Shono. Zeh Pirish Asher Hu B'Tfus B'Perik Ve'elu Menachos Ad Shtei Lechem Ein Pirish Rashi. What's printed is not Rashi's Pirish. What's printed is not Rashi's Pirish. For who shall Parshan Acher? It's another person who explained it. B'Zel Lashon Rashi, and this is the Lashon Rashi Kisvei Yad. So the Shita Mikubetzes, right? The underneath that is the real Rashi, fellas. That is the real Rashi, right? That's what. It's not the Rashbam. Don't say it's the Rashbam. We don't know who it is. Mefarish. He said Mefarish Acher. He said it's a Mefarish Acher. There's a Gemara here. There's a if you want. There's a Gemara over here.
I don't think that's
It's not Zvachim Menachos.
No, I don't think so.
Psachim. Oh, on the top there. Look on the top. That's Benji's Gemara all the way on top. You'll see there's a Zvachim Menachos there. Right there you go. Okay, so you have over here. You have no, okay. Anyway, so this is the real Rashi. I'll be using both, whichever works. It's Daf Yomi after all. Says the Mishnah. These are menachos that you do kemitza, and the kahanim eat the shirayim. There are 10 of them. Minchas asoiles. These are the first 5 of the classic nedavos. Minchas asoiles. That's the mincha of flour with oil. Machvas. That's the flat pan. Macheshes is the deep pan. The hachalos rekikin are the 2 afei sanor. Those are the 2 afei sanor. We said we didn't discuss them pratim, but again, one of them you put the oil in before you bake it. The other one you're going to put the oil in after you bake it, and they're considered as 2 separate kabbanis, fellas. They're considered 2 separate kabbanis. Reb Shimon says, minchas. I'm sorry. Chalos rekikim. Minchas leiv dekichavim. Minchas nashim. Minchas oimer. Minchas chayte. Minchas knois. That's a total of 10. Minchas knois means the mincha of the saita. Minchas chayta is the one of the oil of yored, one of a few arveris where you depending upon your financial status, that's what you're going to bring. And we said these are minchas chareva. Both the minchas chayta and minchas knois are chareva. They don't have any oil because again we don't want to cut mehuda from these people. Reb Shimon Omer, minchas chayta shel kahanim nikmetzes. The minchas chayta of a kohen is nikmetzes. Now, a regular kohen, fellas, this week's parsha, it's totally burnt. There's no kemitza by the regular kohen. If a kohen gives an adava, no matter what he says, if he gives a minchas chayta, machvas, macheshes, avisanor, you burn the whole thing. There's no kemitza. What about if it's a chayta? He does one of the 3 averis that you can possibly go ahead and bring bedali dalas. My kash is on this. The Khan were rich because they did the Keteris. So how could you have bring Dali Dallas? It's not a kasha. Anyway, but you like the kasha. Anyway, so you have if he's a chayta, says Rav Shimon that it would be different than a dava. What's the difference? And you do kemitza first of all. However, it's not like a regular nedava where the shrayim is eaten. The kaimitz karav la'atzma v'shrayim kreven la'atzmon. So Rashi brings, fellas, the Tanakama holds that the minchas chayta of the kohen is no different than the minchas nedava of the kohen. There's no difference whatsoever. The whole thing is going to be burnt. There's no difference whatsoever. The whole thing is going to be burnt. Good? However, the minchas nedava, the minchas chayta of a kohen, now we have machlokes. Says of Shimon, it's different than a nedava because you're going to do a kemitza. It's the same as in the dava because the whole thing is burnt separately. Whereas Tanakama says no, there's no difference. The whole thing is burnt. Okay. Now we had this Gemara before. The same thing. We had the 10, a list of 10. Amar Papa kol hechem ditnan eser tanan. Right. Anytime you learn eser. You count up, guys. Soilis 1, machmas 2, macheshes 3, chalis 4, kikin 5, avodah chavim 6, nashim 7, aime 8, chayte 9, kanayis 10. So what's the purpose of telling this? My kamash malon, bafukim Rev Shimon. This excludes the sheet of Rev Shimon. The Amar mechza chalis and mechza kikin yavi kamash malon deloy. Guys, according to Rev Shimon, you might recall that the afe sanor there was 3 possibilities: either being kula rekikin, kula and chalos, or half and half. Rav Shimon said you can bring half and half. Right? So therefore, according to him, there's 11 karbanis, because the Afei Sana is 3, not 2. And therefore, we're learning, Rav Papa is telling me, not like Rav Shimon, 10, and not what? And not 11. Okay. V'shirayim l'kahanim, and the shirayim goes to the kahanim. The shirayim goes to the kahanim. So in other words, fellas, this is Menachos 101. Guys, this is basic Menachos. Things that we've taken for granted, but we don't know the source. We know that we throughout this Masechta, we know there's Kamitza, and we know there's Shirayim, and you know it goes to the Kahanim. But from Van and Vesenda, where do you know it from, right? And this is the source. So Shirayim the Kahanim, Minalon. The Gemara wants to know, right? Minalon. Says Gemara, Minalon, the Ksiva, in other words, with the Bach. The Gemara says incredulously, Minalon, the Ksiva, that's written openly, it goes to the Kahanim, it's written openly, it goes to the Kahanim. Udloik Ksiva, and the one that's not written, we've seen this before, Ksiv Bey, V'zois Tyrus Amincha, Hakrei Vaisa, B'nei Aroin. Right, this is the Zois Tyrus Hamincha, this is the Tyrus of the Mincha, Hakrei Vaisa B'nei Aroin, L'fnei Hashem, right? Al Mizbeach. I forgot to announce you got the wrong art scroll, right? You wrote the wrong art scroll. So there that it's written, and there where it's not written, you have the riboy is lois Taras and Mincha, Haker v'sabnei Aron, v'nesaras mimenu yochlu Aron ubanov. Okay, so therefore, what's the kasha? Where it's written, and where it's not written, we have a riboy. So I know that the kahanim eat the shirayim. Says the Gemara, that's not the kasha. Bo chitin loy can be boilon. I'm not asking when it comes from chitin. The soilis, the machvas, the macheshes, the chayta, all the ones that are bought from wheat, I know the kohen eats. Ki kami boilon, boyas sa'irin. My kasha is by the minchas kenois and the oimer. How do you know they eat? The two that come from barley, the minchas kenois and the minchas saita, that's the same thing. And the minchas oimer, right? Where do you know that they eat the shirayim? Says the Gemara. Nami midinik metzes, right? Shirecha lekahanim. Once it is, you do the kemitza. I know the shirayim go to the kahanim. So what's the shaila? In other words, you want to know how do you know the kahanim eat? We know, right? Where it says it, and the Absais Tyrus. The fact that we know you do kemitza, fellas, guys, when you do kemitza, the kemitza is you have in your hand that gets burnt. What happens to the rest? Does say shirayim? It's called shirayim. So memela, both the minchas oimer, the minchas kenois of the saita require kemitza. Once they require kemitza, I know automatically that the shirayim go to the kahanim. So what's the Gemara's kasha? Dak, we start a new parak about 8 lines from the bottom. So we want to know, how do you know how do you know it goes to the kahanim? So what's the Gemara's kasha? In other words, so I don't know what the kasha is. Says the Gemara, Aliba de Rabbanan loy can be boilan. Loy the Rabbanan who hold the mincha of a kayin is burnt totally, then I don't have a kasha. In other words, there is no korban, fellas, mincha, that you do kemitza, that there's no shirayim. In other words, there is always shirayim. There's always shirayim. If it's kemitza, there's shirayim. So memela, I know saita, I know oimer because there's kemitza. That's not. Why did Rav Shimon say in our Mishnah? Said Rav Shimon, you can have a kemitza without shirayim being without Shirayim being eaten. Rav Shimon said the kohen is chayta, and he's going to bring a mincha because he's poor. Half is burnt on mizbeach, the kmitza, and half is burnt the Shirayim. Like Rav Shimon, how do I know? So in other words, so you see, like Rav Shimon, the kmitza automatically does not matter Shirayim because you have the minchas of a kohen that you're burning it. So that's the Gemara's kasha. Like Rav Shimon. Says the Gemara, Alibi Darban like Kami Bailan, Ki Kami Bailan, Alibi Darb Shimon. The Amar, Ika Mincha, there is a Mincha, the Mikamsa V'loi Misachla, that there's Kamitza performed and it's not eaten, which is what? Our Mishnah, that Nan Rab Shimon Oimer, Mincha Schreite Shel Kahanim, Nikmetzes HaKaimitz, Korav, Ba'atzmoi, V'Shirayim, Kraven La'atzmoi, Minolan. Like Rab Shimon, how do you know that what? The Minchas Oirin of a Oimer, and Kenois and Saita, how do you know that Shirayim are eaten? That's the Gemara's kasha. In other words, the Gemara just had to develop the question, right? Right. But not the Tanakama is clearly he holds that what? That is this Kmitza, and then mainly you know it's eaten. Okay? So that guys, we're good? So guys, so here's what we're setting out to do. We're setting out to find out, Loit Rav Shimon, who holds that the mincha of a kohen chayte is nikmetzes and it's burnt, like him, how do you know the kamitza of sa'irin by saita and by oimer is eaten? That's the mission. Amacheskia damakra the chol mincha. The pasuk says the chol mincha belula b'shemen v'chareva l'chol b'nei Aaron tiyeh ishkachem. Any mincha that's gemished with oil v'chareva and dry to all b'nei Aaron tiyeh ishkachem. That's what the pasuk says. Ishkachem. A lot of pasukim tonight, guys. If I don't need it for belula shel chitin, right? If I don't need it to tell me that the belula of a chitin carbon, that the belula of a chitin carbon. If I don't need it to tell me that it goes to the kahanim, that I'll use it what? Because by the chitin it said v'hanoseres mimenu yochlu aron ubanav. Guys, by the chitin it said v'hanoseres mimenu, that's left over in Vayikru Vav Tes, this week's parsha. V'hanoseres mimenu yochlu aron ubanav matzos te'achol b'makom kadosh. So fellas, we see that in Minchas Chayte it state openly, guys, v'hanoseres mimenu, meaning after you do the kamitza v'hanoseres, that's left over you eat. So Memela, this pasuk of the belula cannot be. I don't need to tell me what chitin. So what am I going to use it for? I'm going to use it for siren. Im enu Indian lebelula shel chitin, which I know from an aseres mimenu. Tneu Indian lebelula shel siren. That's the minchas oimer. Im enu Indian lechareva shel chitin. Right? Because why? Because that you already know from Zois Taurus HaMincha. Tneu Indian lechareva shel siren. Right? So use for what now. So you have an oil barley, and you have a dry barley. The oil barley is the oimer. The dry barley is the saita, right? Okay. I know chitim shirayim of chitim and v'seres mimenu. I know minchas chayte, which is dry. I know from Zois Taurus HaMincha. So therefore, the whole pasuk now is extra. Good. So why do I dash in the pasuk? I dash in belula soirin for oimer, and sveitens I go ahead and dash in the word chareva in the pasuk for the chareva not of chitin, but the chareva what of barley. And who's that? That is the minchas oimer. So guys, the pasuk says v'chol mincha belula b'shemen v'chareva l'chol b'nei Aaron tiyeh. So the first part, the kol mincha belula, guys, is going on the oimer because I don't need a chitin. I know it says menu. The second one, the chareva, is going on the chareva of the saita because the chayta I know from Zois Taurus Mincha. Guys, good? Good. The Gemara now is going to ask the following: I need this pasuk for something else. So how could I use it to teach me this? Until we get to that, we're going down an Amid. In other words, it's this classic of you're going to get a long-winded brisa, and at the end of the brisa, I'll be talking a lot, and you won't realize that it's a kasha till Amarava, which means it's a teretz. In other words, Omar, they never teach that in yeshiva. Omar Rava or Omar Abaya, they're giving you a teretz. So you're not going to realize that it's until we get there, but we're going to get there. Okay, a lot of psukim, guys, a lot of psukim. Fred the Gemara Kasha, and this is Chizkiah who said this then, right? Fred the Gemara. Does the pasuk Kol Mincha Belul B'Shem Mechareva come to teach me Oimer and Saita that the kohen eats it? Hami Boile L'Chidetanya. I need it for something else. Minayin Shein Cholkin Minchas Keneged Zvachim. You got Kahanim. This kohen likes meat, and this guy Epis is he likes calories. So he goes, I tell you what. You eat the protein, and I'll eat the carbs. I'm a carb guy. You eat the protein, I'll eat the carbs. How do you know you can't do that? How do you know you can't divvy it up that way? In other words, you're part of the mishmah. You got this. He's part of a mishmah. Got that. In other words, he's an mincha guy, and you're a zvachim guy, right? How do you know you can't switch? How do you know you can't switch? Talmud Loimar. It says v'chola mincha. Now this pasuk. This is not the pasuk that's the question yet. The pasuk says, any mincha that's baked, betanur, okay? L'chol b'nei Aaron tiyeh. It says what? L'chol b'nei Aaron tiyeh. So there's two psukim, one in simultaneous, one after the other. So it says v'chol mincha asher tiyeh. That's one pasuk. Bataner, and then it says at the end of the next pasuk, l'chol b'nei Aaron tiyet. All b'nei Aaron it should be. Ish ka'achiv, right? Ish ka'achiv. That's what the pasuk says. So what do I learn from that? I learn from that so you divide it up, right? L'chol mincha shetiyafa b'tana, l'chol b'nei Aaron tiyeh, ish ka'achiv. You divide it up. Right? So meaning, so what do you know from there? That they should each get a piece of the mincha and not one. And instead of in other words, I gave a poor example. I gave a poor example, guys. An example is within the mishmar. Within the mishmar, let's say you have 10 kahanim, and you can divide it up nine ways or 10 ways. So you tell the guy, listen, you divide it up 9 ways, and I'll make it up with you with meat. Talmud Loiman, no. What do we learn from here? For each and every kohen has to be. Okay, that's my example was not a good example. The latter was a good example. Okay, so therefore, Menachos keneged zvachim shloi komu tachteim bedalos. You know why you can't do that? Is because you never have the minchas chayta come underneath, right underneath the carbon. If I'm rich, I'm bringing a sheep. If I'm rich, I'm bringing a sheep. If I'm semi-poor, I'm bringing birds. If I'm really poor, I'm bringing a mincha. So I would say a mincha keneged. I won't go ahead and give it keneged the keves, but what about oivus? In other words, so yachal lo yechlaiku minachas keneged. Let's see first. Yachal lo yechlaiku minchas keneged zvachim shlei komu tachteim bedalos, because they don't go ahead and take its place bedalos. Avo yechloku minachas keneged oifes shari komu tachteim bedalos, right? Because it comes underneath the bedalos. So maybe you say, in my case, we have nine zvachim. We'll give you a chatas oif. How do you know you can't do that? Talmud Loimar, v'chol nase b'marcheshes l'chol b'nei Aaron tiyeh. So we have another riboy. Yachal yachloku minchas keneged oifes shalol b'nei damim v'alol b'nei kamachim. You know why you can't do that? Because for it, even though it's a bird, it is a type of blood carbon. Mashenkin kemach is not. So I would say about yachloku oifes keneged zvachim shalol v'alol b'nei damim. Okay, you get 9 pieces of meat and one bird, right? Maybe you do that. How do you know you don't do that? Talmud Loimar, so we kill them saying Chol b'nei Aaron, the Chol b'nei Aaron, the Chol b'nei Aaron tiyeh. Now notice we haven't bridged akasha whatsoever. We need a pasuk that this is just the lead-in. This is just the lead-in. Yachalo yechloku oifis keneged zvachim shalolu asiyasim biyad. That the oifis you go ahead and karbanis you use oifis you use your hand. Valolo is saying bekli you use a knife. Right? You do malika by the bird, but you do shchita by the zvachim. Aval yechlokim menachos keneged menachos she'elu ve'elu asiyasim biyad. Now, as I would think even in mincha, okay, you have a machmas here macheshes. Tamad laima v'chol mincha belula b'shemen v'chol b'nei Aaron tiyah. There's your kasha, guys. Guys, here's your kasha. V'chol mincha belula b'shemen v'chol b'nei Aaron tiyah. Good. So there's those. You see that you need the pasuk to teach me this. You need the pasuk to teach me that. Yachol yechloku machmas keneged macheshes keneged machmas. Shezuma saying caution because that's the machmas is hard. Zuma saying rochen. Avi yechloku machmas keneged machmas macheshes keneged macheshes. Tamad leimar v'charei v'lchol b'nei Aaron tiyah. Okay, so again, the kasha is going to be now. This is the pasuk that Chizkiah used to teach me what the oimer and the saita that it's what that it's eaten the shirayim. But we're using it to teach me that you can't divvy it up, right? You can't divvy it up. Yachal yechloku b'kachim kedashim avilachu b'kachim kalim. Tamad leimar ish ka'achiv v'im al toida k'shem shein cholkim b'kachim kedashim kach in cholkim b'kachim kalim. Okay, ish right ish chaylik v'afilu balmum. Good, guys. That's it. If you have your own Gemara, put in a question mark right there. By the time you get to here, right? Nothing. Put it in. By the time you get to here, you're lost. So, in other words, let's go back, guys. Let's go back to the Amid base. Omar Chizkiah says, Chizkiah, how do you know? We want to know, guys. Why do we want to know, guys? We want to know how the carbon oimer and the carbon saita that the shirayim is eaten. Frag the Gemara, how could you go ahead and tell me I need it for that? I need it for this. I need it to tell me that what? No matter mincha, machvas, macheshes, you can't divvy up, kachu, kadashim, kalam, you can't divvy it up. So I need it for that. Once I need it for that, I don't have it extra. That's the kasha. That's the kasha. Okay, and for the Gemara, hahu mikol mafka. Hahu, he learns it from the word v'chol. When it says hahu, that the Brisa said shleichloku minchas keneged mincha. The second part, guys, we learned from the word kol. Right? When it says the word kol and mincha b'lu b'shemen, we learned that what from the word kol we learned that then. But from the Blula Bashem and Mincha, that's where we learned the first thing. So in other words, it's the same pasuk, fellas, but we're learning different things from Pesukim. In other words, the Kol, that teaches us Amid Aleph. That teaches us what? Kol. And the Blula Bashem, that taught us that the Kayan gets the Shirayim. So that's the easier. Fred the Gemara, V'afikte l'chad Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda. We use the Kol for Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda. If you go back to, obviously many of you can't go back, but if you go back to Samech Gimel, you probably could go back in there. Guys, in Samech Gimel Amid Beis, the Gemara, Rabbi Yosef Yehuda said, when you say it's a pamir being a minchas mafe, that you can't bring half and half. You can't bring half and half. In other words, you can't bring half chalas, half a kikin. You got to bring one or the other. And how do you know that? It says, Tamalaim, v'chol mincha sheteyofe b'tanor, v'chol naser macheshes, v'chol mat minchas belula b'shemen, v'chol b'nei Aaron tiyeh, and therefore, just like below, the machvas and macheshes were two different ones. Who are din what? Who are din the chalis and the kikin are two different ones. So I need it for that limud. So if I need the kol for this limud, how can I use it to teach me that what? You can't match up machvas macheshes, right? You got the kasha, good. And for the Gemara, no problem. Elahu mivechol, we learn a lot from the vav. Mivechol, from the vav. Okay, so Yotzim Midvareinu, what do we have? Right? Well, Yotzim Midvareinu, we have a pasuk called Mincha Belula Bashemin V'chareva. We're using that according to Rav Shimon, who says that you have Kemitza, and that necessarily does not mean that there's Shirayim, because it could be burnt by the Minchas Chaita of a Kayin. According to him, I have a pasuk that teaches me that the Oimer of barley and the Menachos Chareva of barley by the Slaita, the Kahanim get the Shirayim. That's what I learned from Mincha. Why do I use the kol for? To teach me you can't divvy it. You have to go ahead and divvy it up equally. Everyone that gets kol a piece of the action. I need it for like Rabbi Yehuda. That's the vichol. Okay, very good. Ravina ama Asya miditana Levi. He learns it out from the Tani Levi. Okay, Ravina has a different source. Right? Ravina, that of Shimon, that Sheori Mincha of Sa'irin as eaten by the Kahanim. Ravina Amar, he has a different source. In other words, he disagrees with Chizkiah. I see him in the Tani Levi. The Tani Levi, right, in the Pasha of Matnas Kahuna. Now, Matnas Kahuna, fellas, is in Bamidbar. After the rebellion of Kairach, by Rabbi Yuches, at the end of Bamidbar Yuches, you have a list of many of the Matnas Kahuna. Why? Because Kairach was chaylik on it. So therefore, at that point in time, the Torah stated it's the various Matnas Kahuna that goes to the Kahanim. Okay, and and what does the pasuk say over there? The pasuk says, "Zei yelchol mikodesh hakadashim min ha'esh kol karbanam l'chol minchasam l'chol chatasam l'chol hashamam asher yeshivu li kodesh kadashim l'chavchu ulevanecha." It'll be to Aaron and his children. It'll be to Aaron and his children. So now, the Tani Levi, l'chol karbanam l'chol minchasam l'chol chatasam l'chol hashamam. Kol karbanam. What does kol karbanam come to do, guys? The Rabbis like Shem and Shal Mitzayra. Guys, what was the like Shem and Shal Mitzayra? Gedenks? What do we do? What else do we do? What else did we do before that? What did we do before that? With the like Shem. What did we do before that? Okay, I want what? Before that, you spritzed it 7 times before the paraychas, guys. You spritz the oil 7 times, then you put it on. You got the behind this going good. What happens to the shirayim? Say it goes to the kohen. Goes to the kohen. How do you know that? This is the pasuk that teaches me that. Okay, here's the pasuk that teaches me that. Kol karbanam l'rabbis like shemesh l'mitzayra, that it goes to the kohen. Now, why would you need a limit for that? Sakadech mina eish, right? It says mina eish, kach shekadashim mina eish. So I think anything that goes to the eish, the kohen gets. However, the like shemen which doesn't go to the eish, he won't get. Chasrachmana, mineish chasrachmana, kamash malon, that what? Even though it doesn't go to the eish. L'chol karbanam l'rabbis like shemesh l'mitzayra, that goes to the kohen. L'chol minchasam l'rabbis minchas oimer u'minchas knois. That's what we needed. That's what, guys. That's what we needed. Yes. This is that the kohen gets the shirayim. These are the 2 karbanos that the kohen gets the shirayim from. Now, why would you need a special limit for the oimer? A special limit for what? For the saita. Sakadet chaminan va'achlu esom asher kupa behem, and the pasuk says va'achlu esom asher kupa behem. That's in Shemos Chavtes, in Kisisa. Amar Rachmana v'hai lahater koi. The oimer comes to be mata the chodesh. Asya v'idach nami levar Asya, and the kenois comes to go ahead, find out if she's guilty or not. So guys, so the achila is not kapara. The achila of the oimer is not a kapara. The achila of the slate is not a kapara. So you would think then maybe they don't need it. Therefore, Kamash Malon, it says what? L'chol minchasam, to be marba the minchas oimer and the minchas kenois. Gishmak? Gishmak. Now, so that's where Levi knew it from. Again, Chizki knew it from the Chol Karbanam, Chol minchas, Belula v'shemen, and he's learning it out from those words. Now we're continuing on. We're just finishing the Baisa, but as I pointed out to you, that's the limud from those words. L'chol chatasam, l'rabbis chatas oif, that the kohen eats the chatas oif. Salkadet chamina nevelahi, and therefore you may not eat it because it was malika. Kamash balon l'chol chatasam, he eats it. L'chol ashamam, l'rabbis asham nazir, v'asham mitzayra. Now, when does an asham? Okay, so when does a nazir bring an asham? When it becomes tamei, right? If he's not tamei, he brings an oila, shlamim, and a chatas. If he becomes tamei, he has to bring an asham. And then that purpose is to restart his naziris, right? Restart his naziris. Asham mitzayra is brought on. That's the blood of that asham is going on the behind us with the oil, right? That's what the day of his when he's coming clean. Asham mishara. Asham mitzayra behedik. The Gemara Asham mitzayra says openly that the kohen eats it. Kikachatas asham hu l'kayin, and it says it goes to the kayin. Elul Rabbi Sasam Nazir, right? Ki Asham Mitzayra. Make it that Asham Nazir is like an Asham Mitzayra. Sakle Hamina and Lahachshe Ka Asi. The purpose of Asham Mitzayra, Asham Nazir, is to machshe him to go ahead and start counting again his Naziris. Kemash Malon, therefore he gets to eat it. Good. It says Asher Yeshivu. Again, we're dashing the pasuk, even though we have the limud, the Tani Levi. The Gemara is just bringing in the whole kit and caboodle of Levi. But again, you know exactly what the aim was in this again, according to Rav Shimon, how do you know by the oim and the kanois that you eat the shirayim? We have Chizkias v'chol minchas belula b'shemen v'chareva, and we have Levi's chol minchasam, chol minchasam in Parshas Kairach. Finishing off Asher Yeshivu, Zeh Gezel Hager, right? Lechohi ulvanecha, Shalchohi ulvanecha. Okay, Lechadish B'Avisha. Guys, if someone goes ahead and steals from a ger, he goes ahead and he swears falsely. He has to bring an asham gazelis, right? And if he dies, the ger, it goes to the kohen. It goes to the kohen. If he has no relatives, that's one of the sources for that. Gershon, this guy should call him Kanshanoli Dummy. You see the fact that he has no relatives, right? Okay. Anyway, Zegez Lager, to do whatever you want, even to Mekadosh Nisha. Okay, good. That's the end, guys. The end. Good? That's the end. So, Yetzim Avenu, we got two sources. For what? Loy. Okay, one more time. Just say one more time. I know it. Halavai. As many times as I say it, we should remember it, right?
Oh, me.
Okay, so we started out with a mission to find out that the Kohanim, they get the Shirayim, right? The Gemara assumed that I don't need a source for Shirayim. It's some places it says openly, and the places it doesn't say openly, it says Zois Taras HaMincha, Marbe everything. Good. Why do we Marbe? Minchus Nedava. Minchus Nedava is Chitim. How do you know Sairim? Says the Rabbanan, why shouldn't you think Sairim? The fact that it does Kemitza, of course you eat it. Sairim, Minchus Oimi, you do Kemitza, Minchus Kenais, you do Kemitza. Those are only two Kabbanas that are bought from barley. Once you do Kemitza, doesn't that automatically mean what? You're going to get Shirayim? Says Gemara, you're right. We're only asking Kol of Shimon. Because if Shimon has the opinion, you can have a Kemitza without Shirayim. The Minchus Chayta of a coin. So we have two sources to answer that teretz. We have the Chol Mincha B'Lu B'Shemen according to Chizkiah, and we have the Chol Min Chasam in the pasuk according to Levi. That's what we got for. Okay, now we're beginning a new Gemara. Amrafum Shalmei Ho'evit Kechavim. Let's say a guy says, "I want to bring a shlamim." Says Rav Huna, "Oilais." They're oilais. They're oilais. But in other words, the shlamim, no chazav v'shaik to the koyin, no shirayim. That's it. They get bread. Oilais. Iba yisei mikra. Yisei misvara. If you want, I can tell you a pasuk. I want to tell you it's a svara. Iba yisei misvara. Oivi kechavim liba l'shemayim. Rashi. Liba l'shemayim. Bottom Rashi. The any idea betiv carbon. He doesn't know the nature of karbanis. He wants to give it totally. Hilkach kolol kain legavoya. They don't know any. They don't know kunsen. They don't know that
Everything they gave was Nola.
everything was. They're giving a carbon. They're giving it. Giving. I always speak out the carbon Pesach. Late Rev Miller, fellas. Late Rev Miller, that there was only oilus. Any carbon that was bought was an oila. It would be a chutzpati from a carbon. How can you share something with a Kadosh Baruch Hu? That was the chiddush of the carbon Pesach. The carbon Pesach announced to the Mitzrayim, you think we're nothing. You think we're garnished with garnish. Guess what? We not only we take your God, we eat your God, and we share it from God. So that's the whole. It's a side of carbon Pesach. It says Kisarisim im kivan nashim atuchal. I'm Yisrael. I'm not an Ivri. I'm Yisrael. I'm somebody special. I'm somebody unique. That's what Miller said. I heard many years ago. Even though we did learn that there was shlamim brought beforehand, which kind of messes it up. But until we heard that, it was okay. Okay. Anyway, so this is an oila. So everything is libel shemayim. They don't know anything. They don't know about b'yavay same as svara. Ibay same as svara v'kachav libel shemayim. B'yavay same akra. Asher yakrivu l'Hashem la'oila. What does that mean? So what's the pasuk, guys? This is the pasuk that a guy can bring a carbon. This is a pasuk that a guy can bring a carbon. Dabe el Aaron vel Bonov vel kol bnei Yisrael v'amat aleihim ish mi beis Yisrael umin ager bi Yisrael asher yakiv kabanu l'chol nidreim l'chol nidvaisam asher yakrivu l'Hashem le'oila. Guys, where do you know in this pasuk that a guy can bring a carbon? Ish. It says it twice. One is to be marba, one zicha for the yid, I want us to be marber the guy. And what does it say at the end of the pasuk? It says oila. So you see that what any carbon that a guy brings is going to be an oila. It's going to be any carbon he's going to bring is oila. Says Rashi, Asher yakrivu Hashem la'oila. Yeah. But every he brings is going to be an oila. Uba ovi kechavim kamari. It's speaking about a guy. For Reisha the cry, ish mi beis Yisrael. That's how I know it's speaking about a guy. For Aminu lekaman matam lema ish the Rabbi savid kechavim. So that's how you know it's speaking about a guy. And but anything he's going to bring, guys, is going to be an oila. That's Rav Huna Shita. So a svaru or a kra. Called the Makari oila lahave. Maser Rav Chama Baguri Rav Chama was going to say kasha. Oivi kechavim shenes nadev lehevi shlamim. An oivi kechavim that made an adava to bring a shlamim. Nitna li Yisrael. It should be given to Yisrael. 1 second. Yisrael. Every time she's not levi shlamim nasnal Yisrael oichlin. If he gives it to a yid, yid eats it nasnal hakayin oichlin. Right. So you see that what there's a din of a shlamim by a guy because he can't eat it. He's an oral. Rashi says he can't eat it, but so give it to a Yisrael if he wants to, or give it to Matua. It's kasha of Huna says only an oila. Here you see it's a shlamim. Amarava again. Amarava is a teretz, guys. Very good. Amarava hachi ka'amara. He gives the shlamim al Menachos yischapa ben Yisrael oichlin. He gives the shlamim al Menachos yischapa ben kayin oichlin. In other words, the guy, he's giving a matana to the yid or to a kayin. He can't bring a shlamim. He's saying, I'm bringing this for the yid. I'm bringing this for the kayin. A kayin, a Yisrael, they could. So therefore, it's not a kasha on Rav Huna. It's not a kasha on Rav Huna. How is the kasha on Rav Huna? Maser Rav Shizvi. Elu Menachos nikmatzais v'shireyem lekahanim minches levet kechavim. Guys, is the mincha an oila? No. Did I miss to say that a guy can bring a mincha? Yeah. Kasha nafuna before a Mishnah. Rabbi Yechon lekasha Rabbi Yosei Glili Rabbi Akiva. Our Mishnah is Rabbi Yosei Glili, and Rav Huna said his din according to the Tana Rabbi Akiva. Our Mishnah is Rabbi Yosei Glili. That in other words, guys, we're going to see like Rabbi Yosei Glili, the guy is not limited to an oila, and this din Rav Huna, he's going to Rabbi Akiva that a guy is limited to an oila. Let's see the Gemara. Rabbi Yechon lekasha Rabbi Yosei Glili Rabbi Akiva. Tanya ish. It says it could have said ish. Ma tamalema ish. It could say ish, right? But it says ish. The Rabbi says Evikachavim. That's what Rashi brought to be marba Evikachavim. Shenoidorim nedarim and nedavais ki Yisrael. That he can bring nedarim and nedavais like Yisrael. Now, there's two types of nedarim and nedavais. There's an oila and there's a shlamim. He's saying he could do it like a Yisrael. Asher yagriv Hashem la'oila. Ainli ela oila shlamim minayin. The pasuk says Asher yagriv Hashem la'oila. How do you know he can even make a neder of shlamim? Tamid leimar nidreim toida nidreim. It says nidreim. Right again. What does the pasuk say? It's a very long pasuk, and the pasuk says Asher yagriv kavan l'chol nidreim l'chol nidvaisam. So nidreim l'chol nidvaisam Asher yagriv Hashem la'oila, and he's saying that. According to Rabbi Yosei Glili, the Chol Nidreim, it says the Chol Nidreim. And what do we learn from the Chol Nidreim? That what? The Rabbi says Shashlamim. It says Oila and Nidreim. Guys, Nidreim by nature means either an Oila or Shlamim. Then it says Oila. So obviously, if that's Oila, that says Mefurish in the Pasuk, Nidreim must mean Shlamim. Nidreim must mean Shlamim, right? It's good? So why do we see developing? Rabbi Yosei Glili holds that what? And he's the Tana of Mishnah. It could bring a mincha that you don't have to go ahead and just bring an oila. It's not limited to an oila, and it continues on. Tamadlayim them minay toida minayin. How many can bring a toida? Tamadlayim nidvaisam. It says nidvaisam. Minayin l'rabbi so oifais va'yayin va'alavoyin. Guys, be careful. Count the words. Ha'oifais. He can bring a guy can bring a knife. Vayayin, he can bring a carbon of yayin. Valavoina, he can bring a carbon of lavoina. V'ha'etzim, and a carbon eitzim. Guys, remember, Rabbi said you can bring a carbon eitzim. You would go ahead, you would make it sawdust, and you would take a kamitza. That was Rabbi. The Brisker Rav points out that this is only according to Rabbi. Rabbi is the only one who said you can bring a carbon eitzim. Okay, anyway, how do you know a guy can bring all of these things, including yayin? Guys, keep in mind it says yayin here. Tamad Laima, nidreihem, l'chol nidreihem, nidvaisam, l'chol nidvaisam. It says nidreihem, l'chol, nidreihem, l'chol, nidvaisam. In Kema Tamad Laima oila. So if that's the case, if the guy is in the ballpark for everything, why do you go ahead and say oila? It's if he's b'chal nidreihem and nidvaisam. Oila pratlan naziris. That comes to exclude naziris to Rabbi Yosef Lili. A guy cannot go ahead and become a nazir. He can't bring the carbon nazir. Can't bring the carbon nazir. Can't become a nazir. Can't bring carbon nazir. Good. So what do we see from over here, fellas? Rabbi Yosef Lili holds a guy could bring a shlamim. Our Mishnah says minchas aviv kechavim. Therefore, it's according to Rabbi Yosef Lili. Rabbi Kiva Omer. Rabbi Kiva is of the opinion asher yakrivu Hashem la'oila ein li la'oila bilvad. That's it. Only an oila. Okay, that's it. Stop. Good? Got it? Okay, so those are two shittas. Rabbi Kiva only oila. Okay, now, why did Rabbi Yosef Galili learn from oila? Oila that what? Pratlan naziris that what? He can't be a nazir. Fred the Gemara, v'hai pratlan naziris mehachanafka. He learns that pratlan naziris in the word oila. Mehasam nafka. It says Dabel b'nei Yisrael v'mata aleihem. Ish ki yafli linda neder nazir haza, a person of Bnei Yisrael that expresses a neder to become a nazir. It says openly Bnei Yisrael and not a goy. So why do I need oila prat to exclude a naziris? I have a goy being excluded from naziris. It says Bnei Yisrael ki yafli linda. It says openly Bnei Yisrael and not a goy. And for the Gemara, Bnei Yisrael noidrim ve'in oivik kachav noidrim, right? So that's part of the kasha. So imei hasam ish. Havamina carbon hudlay malese. He won't be able to make a carbon. Nazir schala alayhu, but he could be a nazir. Kemashmon kiafli that he can't even become a nazir. So one tells me that what he can't bring the carbon of a nazir, and one tells me he cannot be a nazir.
Which I know one is like.
Yeah. L'chayra. If he well.
Can't be a nazir.
No. Let's say he can't be a nazir, but maybe he could pay for a nazir's carbon. I don't know.
Who says he can't?
I don't know.
Okay. The Gemara questions. Says the Gemara Vaita. Kiman oz lahodet nan. The following Mishnah. Amr Rav Shimon. Shiva devarim hiskinu bezdin. 7 things takanas of bezdin. B'zeach mehem. We had this earlier in the Masechta. A guy who sends his oila from Medina Sayyam, v'shilach ima nesacheha, and he sends along with the carbon. He sends along. It's accompanying what nesachim, the yayin, the mincha. He sends along. That accompanies it. Krevim mishaloi. Then you bring it. V'im lav. Krevim mishal tzibur. When we went through this, that it has to have. You can't shortchange it. You have to have it. So if he didn't send, he just sent the oila. What do? Then from the tziba's money you'll bring the nesachim. Good. Lema Rabbi Yosef Glili v'lo Rabbi Akiva. Because Rabbi Akiva you can only bring the carbon. You can't bring the nesachim. You're bringing the nesachim as yayin. You're bringing mincha that accompanies the nesachim, right? So l'chayra, let's say it's only like Rabbi Yosef Glili, not like Rabbi Akiva, because Rabbi Akiva says you only bring an oila. On that, yes, I feel it. Rabbi Akiva, oila v'chol chaverasa. You bring an oila and everything, all is chaverim. You have a gears on the side, abiz racha. All the things that accompany it. Okay. Man tana l'hod tan rabbanon. The tana rabbanon. The pasuk says, Ezach. It's a native Jew. It says the pasuk says. This is speaking the Pasha of Nesachim, guys. This is telling us the amount. Chatziyahin, Reviyasahin, right? This is in Bamidbar Tesvav. It says it's Kol Ezrach, maybe Nesachim, maybe Nesachim. Yachaloi Tehei Oilasa Tun Nesachim. I might think, therefore, his carbon other doesn't. Tamad Leima, Kacha. Good. Kacha, that's the way it has to be. That what? So I have a pasuk teaching me that what? Guys, I have a pasuk teaching me that the goy's carbon has to go ahead and have nesachim. Kacha. When you bring an oila, this is the way it's got to be. When you bring shlamim, this is the way it's got to be. Right now, money. Loi Rabbi Yossi Galili, who says what? He can bring yayin alone. Rabbi Yossi Galili, guys, remember I pointed out before yayin levoina eitzim? I pointed out the word yayin above, right? But Loi Rabbi Akiva. Not Rabbi Akiva says you don't bring the sach, right? Rabbi Yossi Galili ha'amar filu yayin. Nami, yayin alone you can bring. Why do we need a pasuk kacha? In other words, kacha, if you bring an oila, you bring yayin with it. Like Rabbi Yosef Glili, you can bring yayin alone. V'i Rabbi Akiva, ha'ama oila in midi achrin aloi. Now you know the answer to Rabbi Akiva already. Iba Yisem Rabbi Yosef Glili, or Yisem Rabbi Akiva. Iba Yisem Rabbi Yosef Glili, samei me'ahi yayin. Guys, above when we said yayin levoina eitzim, take out the word yayin. Take out the word levoina yes, eitzim yes, yayin not. So therefore, what? You need a pasuk to teach me kacha. If he brings an oila, it has to be accompanying the sachim. By same Rabbi Kiva, oila v'chol chavei rasa. Same teretz. Means an oila, when Rabbi Kiva says an oila, it doesn't mean just the oila, it means oila v'chol chavei rasa. Shmak.